Okay, so if you're watching this, you're trying to figure out what to do when you go to Africa. So I'm here with Dave. We're in the Eastern Cape province, down south, just outside of Grahamstown. And I've been with him for the last week and apart. And we've hunted, we've learned a lot together. I've learned a lot from him on specifically bow hunting in Africa. So we're going to tell you exactly what to do, what to bring, how to condition yourself, and just some little tricks.
And also what to expect.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guys come here and they're completely unprepared for what the type of hunting that we do.
Yeah, just for instance, the very first thing out of the gate is Dave and I got out and he recommended that we pair our rangefinders. So we have two completely different range finding systems, and we want to make sure that if he's glassing an animal and hits a range, that it's the same range that my bow is set up to, because my bow is set to my rangefinder. So that was paramount to do that right up front. The other thing was a set of stalking shoes.
Stalking shoes, what we have developed here and what we do, we use leather because of the thorns over our feet, and then wear our old socks and use insulation tape to keep them on yourself. The thorns penetrate through the leather, but not as badly as through just a pair of socks. The socks tend to muffle the sound from the leather, and you can get much closer to animals with stalking. A lot of the guys come here and they've only got normal
hiking boots
and with a huge Vibram sole, and it's like walking on toast or walking on Rice Krispies.
Yeah.
And the animals hear that. They're not used to this flat foot crunching towards them, and you spook the animals, and it's not easy to stalk. With having the socks on, it muffles most of the sound out.
And something that's readily available in the States is an overlay of like lamb's wool or something like that actually binds to your boot that you're currently wearing.
Or a moccasin type of shoe without a plastic sole. So you want the leather sole so you can actually feel each stone as you walk. So you tend to roll your feet.
Or a stick.
Or a stick, yes, because that's noisy.
Right. The other thing is on your equipment. Now, on this trip, I shot my Bowtech or a Realm X, and this bow did phenomenally well this week. We killed 9 different animals in 8 days, and having the bow tuned to the shooter is paramount. I do my own work, but if you don't do your own work or that intimidates you, go to a shop that will allow you to help paper tune and make sure that your broadheads are hitting exactly with your field points out as far as you can actually shoot them, 60, 80 yards even, because that's going to make sure that your arrows are tuned and your penetration is going to be really good.
That's right. You know, you want the optimum kinetic energy behind that arrow. So an arrow that's flying slightly skew, when it hits the animal, that's the direction it's going to fly in and penetrate through the animal. So you want the most power behind that arrow hitting the animal in a direct line. And a lot of the guys come here and they haven't practiced with their bows. They've shot a couple of times and they think that that's fine. And they only shoot their field points, and they think, well, I'm ready to hunt. They don't actually test their broadheads, what their broadheads are doing at different distances. And as we know, a slight bit of hand torque can throw your broadhead off. At 40 yards, can throw a broadhead off at least 2 foot, 3 foot sometimes, depending on the situation. And a lot of the times, because you're stalking a lot, you tend to have marginal shots where your form isn't the greatest.
You have to crouch down under a limb or lean out, and your footing's not always flat and level like it is in your backyard. So you may bring out some steps and stand on 2 different levels with your feet to try to prepare yourself for something like this.
All right. A lot of the guys also, they're not set up for quietness, i.e. clothing, using soft clothing, quivers. If you have a noisy quiver, it all hinders shooting an animal, especially at long distances, because they tend to jump the string.
Something that I do, and if y'all watch my rest videos, you know that I run a piece of moleskin on the inside shell, and this helps you if you bump your arrow, if you're sitting in a hide or actually stalking and it falls out of the cradle for the manufacturer for the rest to sit in, then it'll muffle it by hitting that. That saved us a couple of times this week.
That's right. I spoke to Derek to have a look and especially get the Bowtech to produce another two-piece quiver, especially for the type of hunting that we do here. The two-piece quivers were the ultimate stalking piece of material on your bow. They were quiet. They don't rattle like that. You don't rattle. It just all helps at the end of the day.
Probably the last thing is on your sight. If a lot of guys back east and out west shoot fixed pins, and here your ranges can be exact to the distance, and if you're able to just dial that up really quickly, your PHs, they have the experience to tell you what to shoot, what's a trophy, what's an acceptable animal to shoot, and you have to listen to them and respect their advice that they're telling you. The animals they're different. They're different than anything we've ever hunted, so they've got all these species. They know right inside their head they can pull it up and say, nope, that's not a good one to shoot, but this one over here is, and it's 38 yards. You don't want to put your 35 and have to hold high, you can just hold. Shot placement is so critical. You can hold it exactly where you want if you dial up the range and make that good shot.
And that's another thing that the guys don't realize, that shot placement on the African animals is way more forward than the North American animals. And we had a situation with a blue wildebeest, but I coached Derek and I said to him, listen, those vitals are so far forward, all right, that you actually have to lose an arrow to it, or donate an arrow
to the animal,
because you're going to smash that arrow, and you got to actually hit that blue wildebeest in the exact right spot. If you are slightly out, you tend to have a wound, and that takes time of your day trying to recover an animal, and you could lose that animal. There's no compromise for shot placement at all.
And very sharp broadheads. We ended up shooting all the way through the wildebeest. The broadhead was delivered all the way to the opposite shoulder, and the vital areas were just cut to pieces on a big 2-inch expandable. The arrows that I brought with me were 550 grains total weight, with 200 up front, with about an 18% front of center, and they did really well. Now, they are not optimal for like impala or springbuck or things of that nature, where you typically have a longer shot. Generally, anything 440 grains or up is going to be plenty. You just want to make sure, again, that your arrows are spined to your bow and that you shoot as much poundage as you're comfortable with, but as much as you can possibly get away with here, because you never know when an eland's going to come by, or a gemsbuck, or something that's really substantial, and you need a little extra horsepower to get it pushed through there.
Yeah, and it's really important to know your equipment. You need to know what your equipment can do. You need to look up on YouTube, read about it, and you need to actually really concentrate on what you can do with that equipment and what your broadhead can do. Different broadheads do different sort of things. Expandables open on shoulders, and you have situations where expandable will not penetrate, and then you'll have another situation where expandable will work like an absolute charm. So you got to know what that broadhead and what that equipment can do.
I hope we've answered a few questions for you. It's nothing to get out here and do this. It's just a 15-hour plane ride and a couple of years to save up. So get out there and save your money and come over here and enjoy this wonderful hospitality and these amazing animals.